the top 10 TOEFL listening tips. So TOEFL listening is kind of confusing. A lot of students have questions about it, and our goal together is for you to know exactly what to expect from the test, how to take notes, what types of questions you're going to be asked, and how to answer those questions well. So we're going to do a lot together. My name is Josh MacPherson. I am the head instructor of TST Prep, an online TOEFL school where our mission is simple: to help you get the TOEFL score you need as quickly and as easily as possible. So, very exciting stuff. Let's talk about it right now. The TOEFL listening section, top 10 tips. Let's get into the first tip. Tip number 1. Eliminate choices that do not align with North American academic values. What does this mean? Okay, so the TOEFL test is a test designed to see if you're ready to go to university in America. So there will be listening passages that are conversations that a campus worker will have with a student. And if you don't know about academic values in North America, it might actually make the questions more difficult. So let's make them easier so you understand these values. Two of them that are very important is that campus workers will help if it's their responsibility, and campus workers are supposed to be helpful. Not always. Sometimes when you go to university, you'll find that campus workers aren't really helpful, but they're supposed to be in anyway. And also that they will do jobs that are aligned to their position. So what does that mean? Maybe you're like, what does this mean? Well, in TOEFL listening conversations, so in the listening passage, there are 5 passages. 2 of them are conversations. There'll be a conversation between a student and a campus worker. Here are the different types of campus workers that you might hear in the TOEFL listening: a professor, a librarian, academic advisor, school newspaper worker, and office worker. I would say the school newspaper worker is not so common, neither is the librarian. The most common is the professor, clearly. And then I would say academic advisor and office worker are the second and third most popular types of workers you will hear in the TOEFL listening. Now, it's important to know what their job is. Now, maybe you know what a professor does, not a big deal, but maybe you don't know what an office worker does, for example. So if you don't know their responsibility, for example, that they do not assist with class assignments or describe class expectations, then you might have more difficulty answering questions. Let me show you what that would look like. Here's an example from one of our complete tests at tstprep.com. Why does the student go to see the professor? Now, I can eliminate D to see if she can become a Spanish major, because that's not a professor's job, actually. That is an academic advisor's job. You could talk to a professor about this type of thing, but really you usually talk to an academic advisor about your class credits, about your major, about your minor, about what you want to study, and about your schedule. That's an advisor's job. So if you know about the job, it'll be easier for you to answer questions and to follow the conversation. Something that a lot of books skip and people don't keep in mind, but I've had a lot of students that don't know about this, so it's pretty important. 2 more academic values you should know about is that professors believe in critical thinking and professors believe in fairness. Now, critical thinking, the professor will not tell you to copy or cheat or anything like that. Pretty simple. And also they believe in fairness. So a teacher will not give you extra credit, give the student extra credit, because it's not fair to everybody else. Or the teacher will not give you an extension because it's not fair to everybody else. Now, this isn't always true. You'll go to a university where some teachers are not always fair, but in theory, they are supposed to be. And you could see it in something like, well, here's an example. So the professor will give the student an extension? Probably not. The professor emphasizes that a student must hand in their paper on time. That sounds more like something a professor would say. So if you understand the workers and the values of academia in America, in Canada and America, it'll be a little bit easier for you to find the correct answer. And look at this example here from TST Prep Test 8. Why won't the professor give the student recommendations of people to interview? Well, a pretty good answer is B. She wants to be fair to other students who may also be having trouble. That is a very common idea value. So these do show up. It's not like something that you'll see all the time, but it's something to keep in mind to help you follow conversation passages in the TOEFL listening. That's tip number 1. So as you can see already, we're going to give you tips that are actually helpful, that are important and helpful, and are kind of difficult actually. So take your time. Don't worry if this is a little confusing. We have more resources at tstprep.com if you need more help. But basically, this isn't going to be just 10 quick tips. I'm actually going to, some of them will be quick, but I'm going to explain these in more detail. For example, tip number 2 here that says focus on information explained in depth. Now, what does that mean? Talking about lectures here. According to ETS, the company that makes the TOEFL, they say you should take notes during the lectures and conversations. The questions are not meant to test your memory, but rather your understanding of the conversation or lecture. So basically, they're not going to ask you about little details. Here's an example here so you can see what I mean. They're not going to ask you, what year did Columbus sail for the Americas? That's too specific, too much of a detail. That's not connected to a story, to something explained in depth. Something like identify one reason why Columbus wanted to sail west of Europe, that is more likely to be a question because you need reasons to do something, so they have to explain why, they have to explain what you did, and then they explain the consequences. When they explain a story like that, that is much more likely to be asked about, not these random little details. So you want to focus on information explained in depth. Now, how do you do that? How do you know if something is explained in depth? Well, one thing that you can do is listen for transition words. Words like but, however, on the other hand, also, additionally, to sum up, for example. In this example here, from one of our complete tests, we have words like while, also, as a result. When you use transition words, that means you're bringing information together. When you bring information together, it's more likely to be important. This is a screenshot of a transcript from one of our listening passages and some notes I took. And you see, I took notes here. It's okay if you don't understand these notes. I know they're hard to read. But I took notes here because one of the reasons was that I kind of felt like it was important because of these transition words. They were connecting information. Now, if you want to know what are transition words, like I'll give you some examples in a minute so you can see some other examples of transition words. I think you actually know what they are already. But so in the reading passage, transition words connect ideas. In the listening, they connect information and identify important information. So that's why they're pretty helpful in the listening. Here's a big list with different categories of transition words and what they do. They add, emphasize, show cause and effect, contrast, order, conclude. Order is a pretty good one to pay attention to because that means they're bringing information together. This isn't always the case. This is just a helpful tip for you when you're listening. Pay attention to these transition words when you hear a bunch of them. That means that information is being connected, and connected information is probably more important than just random details. Okay, hope that makes sense. I know I'm going kind of fast. I hope that if you need more help, again, tstprep.com, we have a lot of stuff. Tip number 3 here, be an active listener. What does that mean? So passive listeners is the opposite. A passive listener tries to understand everything. They don't think about why they are listening. So this is probably the situation you're in right now, is that you sit down, you start to listen to a passage in the TOEFL listening, but you don't know why you're listening, and you don't really have any goals. Whereas an active listener has goals. They know why they are listening. They're thinking about, why am I listening to this? What do I want to find in this listening? Ask that question. What do I want to find? Here are some ideas about what you can find. You want to understand the student's problem in conversations. You want to hear how the campus worker offers to help in conversations. And you want to know how the student feels about the advice. Those are some goals in conversations. How about some goals in lectures? I want to find an important detail within the first minute. You have a goal. You're being active. You want to identify 2 ways the teacher explains the topic. Again, active listening. You have a goal. 3, you want to understand what the teacher wants the students to know by the end, the main idea. You're trying to find what the teacher wants the students to know. You have a goal. Keep that in mind. TOEFL tip number 4 here. Take notes like a university student. How do university students take notes? There are 5 rules for note taking that I'm going to give to you right now. Feel free to take the rules that you like and ditch what you don't like. Totally fine. Rule number 1, write down mostly nouns, verbs, and adjectives. 2, write down mostly consonants. That's B, C, D, F, G, H, blah, 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 not vowels. Know your core symbols, like an arrow or a plus sign or a minus sign. Include 7 words or less per line, and indent when 2 pieces of information are connected. I'm going to show what all this looks like in an example here. So if I take this sentence that says, since the 1980s, meteorite finds in the Antarctic have dramatically increased our knowledge of space and its materials. So I focus on nouns, verbs, and adjectives here. So I cut since the, in the, have, are, of. I also just only write down, I try to not write down too many vowels. I write down some. So I have 80s instead of 1980s. I have METRTE, which is for meteorite. I cut the word finds, meteorite, and then I have Antarctic, and I have an arrow that goes up. That's my symbol. And I don't include many words per line. As you can see, there's just arrows and about 3 80s meteorite Antarctic in one line. The next line is indented, so this information is connected. Increased knowledge of space materials. So arrow goes up, knowledge is misspelled, space materials misspelled. This is just an example, really quick so you can see what it looks like. But basically, you want to take notes on the most important information. You want to write down not too many words per line, and you want to focus on important symbols. All right. I'm moving pretty fast. It's so amazing. I have like 10-minute lectures about this stuff, so just saying it in a minute is kind of crazy for me. But I think you get the gist anyway, so I think it works. Here's an example of my notes for a complete lecture. It looks like a lot. It is a lot. Don't worry if your notes look different, but I just wanted to show you that example so you get an idea of what it looks like. Tip number 5, make your eyes your enemy. This is really simple. Basically, when you look around the room on TOEFL test day, you're not listening. Your eyes are a distraction. Focus on your computer, focus on your desk. Make your desk your world. I took the test once. Somebody had a problem next to me. They raised their hand. I looked, see what the problem was, came back to my computer. I realized that I hadn't listened to anything that was being said, and it hurt my score. So make your eyes your enemy, focus on your desk, make your desk your world. Tip number 6 here, know the question types, identify the question types. So there are 8 question types in the TOEFL listening. I'm going to go through them pretty quickly here. I'm going to have a separate lecture about question types to make them more understandable, but I'll just have a short little minute or 2 here. There are 8 types, I'll read them. Just content, just purpose, those are basically main idea questions. Detail questions, the most common. Understanding the speaker's attitude. Understanding the function, making inferences, understanding organization, and connecting content. Couple things to think about here is that this is the most common type of question, which is a detail question. So what are some problems? A lot of questions that begin with what are usually detail questions. Also, I don't know if I wrote it here, but let me go back to here. Number 1 and 2, just content and just purpose. These are always the first question after each passage, either just content or just purpose. These are basically asking you, what was this about? Just purpose will ask you, why did the student go to see the professor? That's always the first question, either after a conversation or after a lecture. So I just wanted to mention that. I don't think I put it here. Okay, so another example here. Why does the professor say this? So there are questions that will be repeated. Here, these questions are kind of nice because you maybe you didn't hear very well, maybe you didn't take notes so well, but you can still answer this question because all you have to do is listen to this audio and understand what's going on. This is understanding the function, usually, when they repeat questions like this. Tip number 7, plan your time management. So time management isn't as much of an issue in the listening as it is in the reading, but it's still something important. There's 2 very simple rules for TOEFL listening time management. Watch the clock and take great notes. Why take great notes? Because it's going to help you answer the questions faster and easier. Okay, when it is time to answer the questions, you will only be able to use your memory and your notes. So that's all you have, is what you remember from the listening and your notes. Now, taking great notes doesn't mean that you have to write down everything you hear. It just means that you have focused notes that you understand that help aid your memory. Okay, so if you're taking your notes doesn't help your memory and you can't listen and take notes at the same time, then your notes aren't so helpful. They're not great notes. So instead, focus on notes that help you remember and notes that help you understand. Now, maybe that means only writing down 5 words in your notes. That's okay. Start small, try to get bigger, but try to write down more. But basically, make sure that your notes are not getting in the way of understanding what you're listening. Okay, very important. Another thing about time management is that the clock doesn't start until after the listening finishes, and you don't see the questions until after the listening. This is a screenshot from ETS, the company that makes the TOEFL. There's going to be a timer on the top. It's not here right now. You'll see a next button that you click after you finish answering the question, and the questions show up one at a time. You cannot skip questions. You can't go back to the questions. You listen, question 1 shows up, you answer it, next, question 2 shows up, you answer it next, and so on, until the next listening passage. Once the clock starts, it is time to answer the questions. You only have about 35 seconds to answer each question. So you can take as much time as you want on a question, you just won't have time to answer the rest of them. For longer TOEFL listening parts, you have 10 minutes. For the shorter one, you have 6.5 minutes. It's usually not a problem, but if you take an average, you have about 35 seconds to answer each question. It doesn't sound like a lot of time, but it is, because to answer the questions, either you remember what you heard or you don't. It's not like the reading where you have to look in the passage and find the answer. You look at your notes a little bit and you remember what you heard and then you answer. It doesn't take as long for the listening. All right, tip number 8 here, use additional resources. So TOEFL, I know, is so exciting, so much fun. Why would you want to do anything else? Well, you would, because the TOEFL can get pretty dry, pretty boring, and you're doing the same thing over and over again. So here are some other resources that you can practice your listening and improve your TOEFL without it being a TOEFL test. Scientific American is a great website for academic topics that are connected to, biology, chemistry, all that stuff. Usually you can find something that you're interested in. So I recommend when you're using these other sites to find topics that you're interested in, because when you do TOEFL, you're probably not so interested in the topic. So find topics that you're interested in, that you want to know more about, and that'll keep you motivated and keep you studying. Another great site is TED Ed. Most people know about TED. TED Ed, the videos are a bit shorter. Most of them are about 5 minutes long, which is more like an academic lecture in the TOEFL. Also, TED Ed has a lot of resources like questions. Transcripts is great. One great exercise for TOEFL listening is to listen to 10 seconds and try to write down what you hear, and then check the transcript to see if what you heard is the same as what you wrote down. Not an exciting thing to do, but it's a great way to practice your listening skills. TED Ed is great for shorter lectures. All right, so, I'm sorry, I got a pro tip here to sneak this in. Whenever possible, practice with audio that has a transcript, even when it is something enjoyable. So yeah, let me emphasize the importance of transcripts. Again, seeing what you hear in text makes it more real. Listening kind of comes and goes, right? It's easy to just listen to a movie, a 90-minute movie, and then I ask you, what did the main character say on minute 26? You have no idea. You know the story, right? Listening comes and goes. Have a transcript. Focus on very short parts, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, to help build your listening. And one great way to do that is through scripts. If you go to Google and you just type in, for example, the TV show, and maybe the TV show name is Friends, and you want to see season 1, episode 3 script, and you'll find the script. So even when you're watching TV shows, movies, you can find scripts very easily on Google. And you can look at the script to help you with your listening. You're watching something that you like, and you're looking at a script and improving your listening skills at the same time. Wonderful. So hopefully that's a little helpful. TOEFL tip number 9 here, track your progress. This is a pretty quick tip, but basically you should have a journal or anything that you can see improvement. Some people use flashcard apps for vocabulary, and sometimes they're good, sometimes they're kind of, not so much fun. But one great thing about them is that they track your progress. They tell you how many words you've learned, how many words are left to learn, and that can be very motivating. So any way that you can track your progress, making flashcards, keeping a journal, writing down the words you learn each day, whatever you can do that you can see improvement over time is really helpful and will keep you motivated. For some people, taking the TOEFL will just be a really quick thing. You get it done in a week and that's it. For others, you'll have to build skills and it'll take a little bit of time. Stay motivated, track your progress, it'll be very helpful. And the last tip number 10, is of course to get professional support from an experienced TOEFL teacher. TST Prep, we have a bunch of experienced teachers that are ready to help you get your score as quickly and easily as possible. Studying alone, no problem at all. Some people will need more help. Definitely get professional help. And I'm going to say this especially for the speaking and writing. Because the speaking and writing are production. You produce that. And it's very different. It depends on the student. So everybody will have a different strength and weakness. Listening and reading is a little bit easier to do on your own because you have the questions and an answer key that you can check out. So that's it, our top 10 TOEFL listening tips. I hope by now you feel like you've achieved your objectives, you understand the TOEFL listening, and you know what you have to do to get a high score on test day. And to practice, don't forget to check out our website, tstprep.com, for a complete TOEFL test with an answer key, essay examples, and all that good stuff. But that's it. And let me just take the moment here to say thank you guys. Thank you for staying to the end. This is a long lecture. There are so many things you could be doing besides studying for the TOEFL, but you decided to take the time because you care about your score. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your time with me. I hope you found it helpful. And that's it. All right. I'll see you in the next one, guys.